am excited to have my next speaker on and the next interviewee. I've known Don virtually for quite some time. It's been great. I actually met Don through Rob Polecki, who I had on earlier in the podcast. Phenomenal story. Just give you some quick background on Don and why he's just going to be powerhouse today. Don went from being, $50,000 in debt, no hope, started staring down bankruptcy. It was his only way out. And then from that, he's flipped the script to where now he's, worth over $1 million and should reach his financial independence in the very, very near future, all from starting investing in real estate about 4.5 years ago when he was 40 years old, ladies and gentlemen. That is fantastic. So those of you out there that think I'm too old, I can't make it, I won't make it, Don is here to change that mindset. And that's why we're so happy to have Don on today. Don, thank you for coming and being a part of this project. If you could take, 5 to 7 minutes, tell a little bit everybody about kind of who you are, where you came from, your background, and obviously your why.
Yeah. Thanks again. Thank you for having me, Cameron. And yeah, like you said, it's never too late, So, well, basic background, I guess. So going way back, I come from a line of, military heroes. Essentially, my dad was a Vietnam vet. Both my grandparents, my grandfather should say, fought in World War II on Omaha Beach and Normandy on D-Day. So I came from this line of these great stalwart men to give you examples of how to be. I did not follow in their footsteps. I did not go in the military. But we moved around a lot when I was little. Being a military kid, we transferred frequently. Born on a military base even, but with all those transfers between Idaho, California, Georgia, we ended up being in Nebraska, where my dad finally retired from the military. That's kind of where I grew up, just around Omaha, Nebraska, a small town north of there called Blair. Spent my childhood there, I guess, and we'll say young adulthood. I got my first job when I was 14. My parents, were never wealthy. My dad had just a decent job, I guess, but to work at the nuclear power plant. My mom was a secretary. They were, great parents, provided for us what we needed, never had anything lavish or anything, but great examples. But I wanted, like most kids, I wanted to have the cool stuff that my friends had and stuff, but, I couldn't get them to pay for it for me. So as soon as I was able to, I got a job at 14, working at a local Dairy Queen in town. I made a whopping $3.25 an hour. It's hard to sometimes think back. I spent how many hours making that? Just $3.25.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So, the good thing is I was always a saver. I never, I didn't just go spend my paychecks, and I saved up and was able to buy the nicer things. And even by the time I was 16, I from the savings, making that small bit of money, I was able to buy a vehicle from each I liked. It was actually a lowrider. Got a lowrider Chevy Blazer, put some nice stereo in there, and did all that, working at Dairy Queen. But as a kid, again, I was always interested in how things work. I probably should have most likely been an engineer or something, but I like to take things apart and figure out how they work and put it back together and all that. And that even include money. So I at a young age, kind of learned, self-taught, I guess you'd say, about stocks. This is pre-internet days, so early 90s. I'd be looking at the newspaper, see what the stock prices have changed from the day before, and kind of followed those a bit, and did some mock investing games, I guess, whatever they did back then. I don't know how they did it with that internet, but I did that and did pretty good usually. So I kind of followed that path a bit. And then, a bit later on, as I got older, I made a decision that, probably most people at that age wouldn't do. At the age of 21, when most people are out partying and having fun, I decided to serve a mission for my church. So I actually did that and spent 2 years in Argentina. And that was, a fantastic time for me, and it definitely helped me develop quite a bit and change my perspective on things in life and the things we had. But I came back and got back into the routine of things. I started school. Actually, I started school before that, actually, but continued school, I should say, continuing a business degree. But at this time, I'd gotten a job working at a rent-to-own store there, and I was making $13 an hour now, so doing much better than the 325. But I think that was the most money I'd made in my life at that point. But it was, I was going to school in the mornings and doing that at night, and then I got married. And when I got married, I, for whatever reason, made the decision, decided that I needed to make more income. I had a wife to support now, so I was like, I need to have more income. So I took a promotion at work, which took away my time for school. So I was now working, 55 hours a week. So school was pretty much impossible. So then I later regretted that, but eventually at some point, the way things worked out after several years of working there, I actually got fired. I lost that job, which was a good thing, I guess. In the end, it was a blessing, but because otherwise I probably would have never left. But ended up leaving there, getting a different job. This time working at a financial firm. It's actually at this point, but by the time I'd moved up that promotion I had there as a manager, this was actually a cut in pay to go to this other job, but it allowed time to go to school, and they offered tuition reimbursement. So I definitely took that and finished school with a degree in finance, banking, investment science, portfolio management, and accounting. So essentially four majors all around finance and investing. And I plan to continue in that path to become like a financial advisor, portfolio manager, something in that path. But by the time I'd finished school, because I was going part-time, through this, because we had at this point 3 kids, and it was difficult to try to go full-time for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I got done, it was in 2008. And if those that remember 2008, the financial crisis, everything,
Yep.
There were no jobs, in that realm. All the places where I would have wanted to work were all closing down, going out of business, laying people off, so I was like, well, that's not going to happen. So I decided to stay where I was at. At least I had a job that was secure. I wasn't going to be the new guy somewhere and get the first one to get laid off. So I kind of just continued there. And again, there was as I looked for jobs, there was really nothing. The only thing close to finance related was accounting jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually when I decided to go back to school and get that accounting degree to add on, because I was like, well, maybe I could just go get a CPA instead. So I planned to do that. And the ultimate goal, so during this whole time, this is when we were still living in Omaha, Nebraska. We knew that at some point we wanted to move to Idaho. My father had passed away in 2003, and my mother had moved back to Idaho shortly after, just to be close to her parents. But she herself, had MS, so we knew that at some point she was going to need more help, so we wanted to be close to her. So I was trying to figure out a way how we could get out there. We needed money to support ourselves out there. Mm-hmm. So with all this, again, trying to study for the CFA exams and the CPA exams were very rigorous. There lots of time needed for that, and I was not willing to sacrifice my family time more than I had to be able to do that. I knew some people that, a guy that I know that said that he lost his first marriage because he was studying for the CFA exam. It took so much time that his wife was like, "No, I'm not having this." So I was like, "Well, I don't want that." So I kind of just more or less gave up. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. So I just like, I'll just be satisfied with what I have and go from there and see what happens. Well, I got to the point in, I think 2014, where, my mother was no longer able to travel. So she would usually come back to visit us every time when we had a child born or on a first birthday or some important event.
Right.
And it got to the point where she was no longer able to do that. That's when we were like, okay, we need to get there now. We of course thought about it. We prayed about it, and we did feel that we needed to move. So I approached my employer and I said, "Hey, I'm moving to Idaho." I didn't ask if I could or anything. I was like, I'm moving. Let them know. Yeah. If they have let me go, whatever, it's fine. I figured if this is where we're supposed to go, things will work out. Yep. But luckily for me, they offered to let me work from home. So I was like, yeah, I'll gladly do that. So I started working from home, a year before we moved here, just to get the bugs worked out, because this is before the rest of the world was doing it, really. And we moved here to Idaho in 2015, and just been here since. So I'm not sure what point you want to get into the real estate and stuff, but that's basically my background, what brought us to Idaho.
Nice. So let me ask you this question, because I think it's fascinating. There's a good correlation between, kids who are move around a lot or kids who don't move around, and then obviously there's these kids who come from military backgrounds, right? There's always just this very unique, intrinsic built of just toughness and grit, right? That you have. So help me understand a little bit more, Don, about that moving, because moving around, I'm obviously out of the country, in country. What was that like when you would move out of country and then having to adapt to that new environment, and then
Yeah.
obviously coming back, back to the States, and you're like, whoa. I mean, help us understand kind of those cultural shocks and those
Yeah.
changes. And then the second question to that would be, who did you connect with the most? Did you bond a lot with your siblings, or was it just easy for you to make friends?
Yeah. So I guess moving within the country, I'll start that first. As a kid, moving within the country, um, yeah, it was rather difficult. I mean, I was at that point in my life, I was pretty open. I could make friends pretty easily. Um, I had two sisters, so I was the youngest of three, so I had two older sisters. Um, and yeah, I guess we somewhat bonded, but I was usually out more adventurous myself, so I'd be out the one doing things, and even at one point when we lived in California, I I don't know how I did this, or I'm kind of crazy thinking about it, but we took a bus home every day from school. One day I decided I don't want to take the bus, I'm gonna walk. So I walked. I don't know how many miles it was, or luckily for me, I'd memorized the bus route, so I just followed the way the bus drives, and I got home. My parents were worried sick by the time I got there, like what
Yeah.
happened? But yeah, so I made friends pretty well in most places. The only place I personally did not like so much was Georgia. When we lived there, the schools were a bit more difficult.
Mhm.
It was the only place I think I can recall anyway that I would get paddled for not getting my homework done. Um, and I definitely got bullied on the bus quite a bit. Some other kids there, were bullying me. So that wasn't fun.
Mhm.
But everybody else was a good experience. Now moving out of the country to go on the mission, that was definitely a culture shock, like you said. Um, I was so you don't typically think of Argentina necessarily as like a third world country or something, which it's not, I guess, generally. But I was in the northeastern section of the country, kind of bordering Brazil and Paraguay and Uruguay, um, and there were a lot of areas where it was kind of outside of big cities, and so Buenos Aires, of course, by itself is a huge city, which is not too much different than anywhere in the U.S. But most of these other places, kind of out in the country, are very, very different, very humble people. So yeah, getting there was definitely a culture shock to begin with. Seeing real poverty firsthand. Of course, you see things on TV, but until you see it in person, it's totally different. Um, and so we go to these places that are basically shacks, um, you know put together somehow, just kind of leaning together, and dirt floors. And remember that I think the first day I was there, we went to visit a family, and these couple little kids were just chewing on some raw meat, and I'm like, wow. It's like, doesn't seem sanitary, but I was like, okay. And it was just I don't know, it was definitely difficult to adjust a bit, for sure.
Mhm.
But after a while, it became normal. It was just that was normal for me. And so it was
Yeah.
didn't really notice anymore. Then when I came home, it was another huge culture shock, going the reverse way. I'd forgotten how people lived here, and come home and see, like, everybody's driving new cars, and all this stuff, and I'm like, wow, people just have no idea how much they take for granted, not realizing how good we have it here. And I remember one of the people I met down there, one of the things he had mentioned, he and it always stuck with me. He says, even our poor here in the U.S. are still rich compared to them. We have government subsidies and things to help take care of the needy, whereas they generally don't have that. It's a lot of
Mhm.
corrupt government, and things they don't have the resources for. So it's quite a bit different, for sure. But I was glad to have the experience myself. It, like I said, put things into perspective for me. And it's been since then, it's been actually one of my dreams to get to a point someday where I can do something to help the people down there.
Mhm.
Whether that be, I don't know, building a factory, or do something to create jobs that can pay them a real wage. There's a guy that we knew there who's taking care of his family. He would work long days and only make enough to buy a loaf of bread to feed his family.
Man,
So yeah.
man, talk about that shock of going from plentiful to nothing, and then back to plentiful. You know, It definitely can open up the eyes of many, especially, you go from, California to Georgia. I mean, that's a culture shock as is, West
Yeah.
Coast, almost to the East Coast, if you will. And then now we're heading south to just a mixture of cultures, right? A mixture of cultures um, that you not a lot of people experience. So, only those that can move around are relating. Like, man, I remember what that was like moving. I don't personally. I mean, we didn't move a lot when I was a kid. So, which I think is very fascinating. The other question I have is, when did you realize as a child? You said you saved a lot, right? Like from
Mhm.
12 years old to 14, you bought your first lowrider, which I think is fantastic. Would love to see a picture of the lowriders. So what instilled in you at a young age to save? What instilled in you at a young age to be able to look at that and say, do I spend it on this or do I spend it on that? Did that teaching come from your parents? Was that something that was built in? I mean, help us understand kind of where that mindset of saving and spending smart and not just spending to spend.
Right. I don't really know, honestly. Yeah, the early memories I have about money really was playing Monopoly with my family. We'd play the game of Monopoly, and I would usually always win. So I had this, I guess, a knack for being smart with business, I guess. But I'm sure there were some teachers from my parents, and nothing I can really truly recall that they said this and this and this, but I'm sure my mother probably taught me about not getting into debt and saving and spending wisely. So yeah, somewhere it came in there. Can't really say for sure where,
Mhm.
but I'm glad I did. I saw my older sister. She got a job when I think she was 16. And she was kind of the opposite. She would spend every paycheck she got. So she would go buy, of course, you know, early 90s. She'd buy cassette tapes, not CDs of before CDs, but she'd go and spend her money on music and clothes and stuff, and be broke all the time.
Mhm.
It got to a point later on when she later was looking to buy a new vehicle and didn't have the money for the down payment. And I was like, well, I can lend it to you. I didn't have a vehicle yet. I was still like, probably 15 or late 14, I don't know for sure. And I was like, well, I've got 1,500, I can lend you, you know. Um, Whereas like, she made more than me, worked a lot more than me, but I had the money saved up because I wasn't just wasting it.
Yeah.
I preferred to, I did, not say I didn't spend it. I spent it on nice things, but I'd save up and spend it those specific things. Like I bought, a nice, home stereo for my room, and then, some nicer clothes, and then that, the vehicle and the stereo and everything. So I had my things I would spend on, but they were usually these more expensive things. But I wasn't just frivolously spending on whatever came around.
Hey, that's awesome. I mean, you think about that, like somewhere deep. I mean, it's amazing you were able to spend, save $1,500 when you're only getting paid just over $3 an hour. You know,
Right.
I mean, kids these days they have no idea what that was like. $3 an hour they make that, and sometimes almost an hour.
Yeah, yeah. It was like
They
my,
go
my
like,
kids
what?
now are making like $13 an hour. I'm like, man, you don't have
Exactly.
good have it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So as you transition from like the childhood now to an adult, I just have that question, like, are you teaching and instilling financial principles to your children,
Mhm.
and teaching them the value of a dollar and the value of working? Or, how have you learned from, what the childhood to where you are now? And are you passing that knowledge on to your own kids?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to. They're still at the age where it's kind of like, they're getting it, but it's not quite, enough to care yet. So,
Hmm.
but I know it's not in one ear and out the other, because they are paying attention. They do, it is getting in there. But yeah, I'm definitely teaching them. Yeah, so I've over the last few years I've read several books, especially around real estate and financial independence and personal finance, things like that. So all these things have helped me, become more rounded and understand things even deeper. I try to get them to read some of these books. Of course, they don't want to. It's too boring, right? But I tried even saying, okay, well, how about you read it, write up like a half a page report about what it was about, and I'll pay you for it. So you get paid to read books. Um, Still wasn't enough incentive for them to do that. I even had one of the authors of one of the books who was even willing to pay additional to what I was going to pay them, to essentially double it or more.
Right.
And I was like, hey, the author's going to pay you to read this book, and this still wasn't enough for them. So
Hmm.
it got to the point where I actually decided, okay, I'm just going to write my own book and see if they'll read it. So I actually wrote a book, have not published it yet though. That's what's one of my goals this year, to get it published, but I wrote it like in 2018, I think. Kind of for that purpose. I'm like, maybe if I write it, they'll read what I write. So I wrote it, and then actually had them read my printed copy of it all. Just say, hey, go through this and find errors. Let me know what you think about it. Get your insight. So I want to make it entertaining because it's basically geared for kids their age. Anyway, it's not like an adult book. It's more of a teenager, young adult book. So I want to get their insights on it, see if it's interesting for them, and so that kind of forced them to read it. So they did read it. But we did have several conversations. Like we'd usually have like weekly family discussions. We usually talk about finances, and especially now that they have jobs, we told them, okay, when you get your paycheck, have them split it out. So most of that's going to savings. You'll have a little bit in your checking, and that's what you're going to use to spend. But even then, spend wisely. Don't just go buy whatever you don't need. And so they've been very good about that so far. That they, my oldest one, she's actually in college now. She's 20. So she does spend a little more on other things, but mostly she's still saving most of it. One of the things that I've taught all of them that they know for sure, something that I wish I knew when we bought our first house, is I told them, when you're ready to buy your first property, your first home or whatever, make sure you do what's called a house hack. And of course they know what that is, but I'll explain. So what that is would be that if you buy a property, for example, just a single family home, right? Essentially is what back in our day we'd call just have roommates. So you buy the house, you rent out your rooms to your friends or other people, or even better, buy a duplex, triplex, fourplex, live in one of the units and then rent out the other ones to tenants. And that way, that income from that other rent is usually enough to fully pay for your mortgage, maybe even more. And that way, it saves you your biggest expense of your housing. Instead of spending now I guess $800 to $1,200 or so a month on a rent or something, or even a house payment. That's paid for you. So you're essentially saving that money while somebody else is still paying down your loan. So that they know that no matter what, when that day comes, that's what they're going to do. And of course, we'll help them do that and make a wise decision with it. But I want to set them off on the right financial foot to not get into debt at a young age.
Man, that's awesome. I'm going to share this part with my kids because we do that. Our those that we're still living at home, they have jobs, right? And we take the bulk of their paycheck and just dump it right into savings, and to watch that dividend pay off, right? And so they look and say, oh, I only have $50 to spend, right? That's what I can go out and blow money on, but yet I've got all this other reserve that they don't actually ever touch. Yeah. And we open that up to when they need to do like big things. Sports have come up, and so I got to buy softball equipment, got to get stuff for rugby and soccer, and they have the means. And there's something about when your kids spend money that they've earned on things that they need, man, all of a sudden, man, they take care of that. They're taking care of that like crazy. That nobody touches it. Don't touch mine because I saved my hard-earned money for this. And I think, man, that is so cool to know that we're not just crazy parents, trying to.
Well, and it also helps them to make wise decisions. So when it comes down to say, oh, I want to buy this. It's like one of my daughters likes doing cosplay stuff. So she's like, I want to buy this new wig or this outfit. I'm like, all right, well, are you going to buy it? She's like, wants me to pay for it. I'm like, well, if you're going to buy it, do you really need that badly? So it makes them, maybe I don't need it. So it makes them take them to think about what they're about to spend money on to see if they actually really want it. And of course, with them too, my youngest is 10. Even with him, I try to teach him about the opportunity cost. He likes to spend, he likes to play, games like Roblox and things where you have to buy things in the game. So I'm like, okay, well, for your allowance or your what you call it, whatever he has paid this week for being good and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like you can spend your $5 now on a Roblox thing, or you can wait and save that, and maybe in 2 or 3 weeks buy something better. That's the more expensive things. That way you're getting the cool things you really want instead of just buying whatever you got now because you got money to spend. So it's good to teach them about these opportunity costs of you spend it now and you don't have it, or you can save it and wait and get something better down the road.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful because even as they grow up, even now, it's one of those things anybody can learn, right? Do I spend now because I can, or do I hold on and say, well, let me get the bigger items? What a fun game to play even as adults. Like, do I spend this now, or do I wait a few weeks so I can buy the bigger and cooler stuff? And I think, man, such a powerful principle that I think we all need to learn better on just the principle and the power behind spending and saving, but what doing with an intention and purpose.
Yeah,
Man, that's awesome.
yeah,
Man,
definitely,
that's awesome.
definitely teach them more so about especially investing, not just saving, because even saving doesn't really get you ahead, because especially now with the interest rates at banks, you really make nothing. So you're actually losing money. But I teach them about investing wisely. I've actually got my oldest daughter. Maybe we'll get this later. We can talk about the real estate stuff, but I've actually got her investing a little bit of her money with mine in some deals, so that she can actually see the actual results of it, and get the returns in her hands. Say, okay, yeah, this does pay. So
Yeah.
good to get that experience. Of course, she didn't have the money to fully invest in something, but okay, we'll take whatever few you can spend and risk, like say, of course, it's not gonna be risk. I'm like my person guaranteeing it's like, you won't lose it in my life. If something goes south, I'll cover it. But I want you to get that experience, to see in firsthand experience that you invest a couple thousand and you're gonna get you're gonna double your money here in a couple of years. So yeah, it's great to get for that experience as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a great transition into this part of the question that as everybody probably dying to know. Let's talk about a little bit about how how did we get in to the BK facing, right? How did you get into that space of, man, this is the only way out? Because I can tell you right now that you are probably there's probably thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that are or might be thinking, man, BK is the only way to go right now. I mean, it's just the only thing that I have. So help us, take us through that. What was that process, and why did we think that? And then how did we get out of that process?
Sure. Yeah. So going back, being that I was always a saver, it seems strange that to get to that point, right? So, when I was still single and, like I said, working at that rent-to-own place, making good money, I was able to save up a good amount of money still at that. I lived cheap. I had a apartment. I think I paid like $400 a month, and my only other expense was, I splurged and bought a new car. I never had a new car in my life, so I bought a new car. But even then, it was like $250 a month payment at that point. So between them, when I was making between the low rent and that car payment, it was like, yeah, that's not, I can handle that, and of course I pretty much ate like nothing, like a typical single guy, had like sandwiches and frozen pizzas. But when I got married, my wife was actually from South America. She's from Paraguay. And so initially there were some expenses involved with that, for immigration and things we had to pay for, which wasn't too bad really overall. And so we're still, overall, I was still doing good. We're still saving and no problem. Most until later on, I guess, probably when we started to have kids and just, other expenses came in with that, hospital bills and baby formula and all that kind of thing. Our oldest daughter, actually, she even had to have a surgery when she was 5 months old. So that, brought in some expenses. And, it's, I can't even really go back to pinpoint if there was a specific point where it started at all, but just over time, slowly, things began to creep up. These mostly medical bills and others general living expenses. We weren't living there. Actually, we're still I guess by this point, by the time our first one was born, we actually bought a house. So I did buy a house. This was 2003, I guess. But we didn't. This was, of course, back when banks were throwing money at people. So we didn't go and take. They were like, "What proof you for 500,000?" I was like, "Yeah, we're not doing that." It's like, I know I can't afford that, so I'm not gonna be stupid. So I was still smart. We bought what we could afford to pay, and didn't overdo it. But of course, didn't know about a house hack. I would have did that for sure if I'd known about it. But so it wasn't that difficult still at that point. Our home payment wasn't bad. Just as we had more kids, more expenses kind of come up. Myself, I had a kidney stone, or maybe two at that point. Those, of course, incurred hospital bills for different things, those exams and x-rays, and I had to have one actually physically removed. Our kids, just general things, get injuries. Our youngest one, or not the youngest now, but our youngest of the three at that point, she had got pneumonia, broke her arm, broke a toe. So, all these different medical bills just kind of kept piling up. I think along the way, somewhere we tried to start a business as well. Something my wife was going to do. That brought a bunch of expenses with it as well, which unfortunately ended up I think being a big part of it, because I think at this point we had some savings still, not a lot, but something. And then kind of all that essentially got wiped out to try to pay those bills and not let that debt pile up.
Yeah.
And this was, of course, right around that 2008 time frame when bad time to start a business, and so it was just very difficult. And so just, from there, it was just basically, trying to just feed the family. We do our grocery shopping, and it's like, the grocery bills would be more than I've got in the bank account. So I'm like, well, we got to put in the credit card, how else are we going to pay for it? And again, we're not like buying steaks and all the expensive stuff. It was just, basic living food. My wife wasn't willing to let the kids starve. So she's like, well, they got to eat, they got to eat. So they can't just have, macaroni and cheese all the time. So, okay, yeah, I guess, so, we do these grocery shopping and put on the credit card, then put the gas on the credit card, and, everything we could on the credit card. And then each month that roll around to time to pay. I'm like, well, don't have enough to pay it all. So just have to pay off what we can. And that just kind of slowly builds up over time. And that's really what, got to the point. It was just, man, there's just, nowhere, no way out, So I thought about, okay, I could go get a second job, work more, but again, didn't really want to do that. I was like, what's the point of that? But my family never see me. My kids won't even know who I am. Of course, my wife didn't want that either. So we were like, we'll just keep pushing forward and see what happens. There's a point when we were, okay, my wife could go get a job, but at the same time, she'd always been a stay-at-home mom for our kids. And it's like, so what would be the point of that? So you go get a job, and that job pays for daycare. So somebody else is raising our kids. That's what's the point,
Right.
So we decided against that. And so yeah, we just kept pushing forward doing that. And it wasn't until at that point, our youngest of the three started kindergarten. So she was like, okay, well, so now she needed something to do. But again, we didn't want to have a job where that, if the kids are sick, or especially during summer, it's like, what do we do with the kids? If we can pay for daycare or pay for a babysitter, and that's like, well, that'd be more expense we don't want to pay. So we looked at options of what she could possibly do that's flexible in that degree. And somehow, I don't even know how, but for me, the thought came to mind about being a realtor, real estate agent. So I was like, what do you think about that? And so she looked into it, and she's kind of opposite of me. She really enjoys talking to people and helping people. Not that I don't like helping people, but I was much more of an introvert. Was never very open just to start talking to people, especially strangers, So, but for her, she enjoyed that. So she liked it, and said, okay, yeah. And again, she's from South America, so English was not her first language. Still basically learning English really at that point. And so she studied, took the exams, failed it the first time, took it again. I think failed it again the second time. Took again, so either third or fourth time she finally passed it. So the good thing about this point is she was studying so hard. She knew the material better than anybody else. What she just didn't understand was the language barrier. She couldn't take the test in Spanish, so she had to do it in English, and the words were sometimes difficult. But she passed, and so that was a start there. Okay, well, now we can maybe start having some additional income through what she does there. But of course, she was not also necessarily looking to do it full time. So she would just, the whole plan was to do it part time as she had time, because she still had to get the kids ready in the morning to get them to school and take them to school and pick them up and all that stuff. So she would do it kind of part time. So started slow, but at some point she started working with some investors. One of her first clients was a friend of ours. He was actually a lawyer, and he was buying a bunch of properties in cash. This was probably around 2010 or so. So houses were still super cheap. But he of course, being has a law firm, he had a business line of credit. So he would use his line of credit to buy them in cash, fix them up, refinance them later to pay back that line of credit. So something today is called the BRRRR process, which is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. For me, that was just amazing. He was able to do that. I was like, that's cool, but I didn't have the cash to do that. Where am I going to get the funds? So at that point, even back then, I had, well, I guess even the 2008 crash, I was like, man, it would be great to buy houses right now, but I was like, I have no idea how to do this or how I can do it. And on top of that, for whatever reason at the time, I didn't even think about renting the house. I was like, I just could buy it and sit on it for a few years and resell it. But I was like, how can I make that payment? But so I didn't understand even renting them. I was like, I didn't think about, you tenant pays it. But anyway, so I had the mindset that real estate was for the rich and wealthy. They're the ones that play in that game, not me. But I was like, maybe there's a way. So kind of by accident, I guess, my wife, her broker told her to read a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller. So I would go online to look for that book to buy for her. And as I did that, I found another one called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And so I was like, that sounds interesting. So I went ahead and got them both, So she had the one to read, and then I'd always go with her when she did showings for houses. I'd go with her to, basically more than anything, be there like security, I guess, to not have her be alone. And so I would sit in the car and read that book while she was showing a house. And so that was kind of my first really experience or understanding about real estate as a investment, and a form of income.
Mm-hmm.
But still, for me, the downside was, okay, when I read this book, it said, you need 20% down payment to buy these houses. And I was like, well, I don't have that either. So how am I going to do this? But of course, I know that I was like, there's got to be a way. But I just didn't know what it was just yet. So again, fast forward now to this. So like I mentioned earlier, we decided to move to Idaho. So kind of at this point, I put all that on hold. I was like, even if we did end up getting a property there, I didn't want to, move and have a property long distance. I didn't know how to do that or handle that. So I was like, let's just wait. So we moved to Idaho in 2015. And then about a year later, I got back into it. Just honestly, kind of by accident again. And some of these might just be fate or had to be or whatever. But I generally don't watch much TV, never really do, never have. I like being busy and doing things, so I'm not just sitting down watching TV shows.
Right.
Well, there was one day I sat down just for like a minute, just because, like, okay, I need to just relax for a second. So I sat down, turned the TV, and like right there was a commercial for this one of these like guru type seminars coming through town, talking about making money in real estate. So like, that sounds interesting. It's like, let's go check that out. So we went to their free event, which of course they upsell you on their thing later. But we went to this event, and I was like, this is pretty cool. I like what they were saying. It was more about house flipping though, which in where this market we're in Idaho Falls, at least at that point, again, 2016, I was like, there's not a lot of houses here to flip really. There's not much we made, so I don't have like a big inventory to even choose from. So it'd be hard to really make that work, especially with the cost they wanted for their program. But I was like, just that they had like this was the free 1-day event that they say, hey, come back for a 2-day event. It's like $100. Come back to this. I'm like, all right, let's do that. Let's go back to this 2-day event and learn more. So we did that, and then of course this is then where they sell you on their $50,000 program. Like, well, I can't buy that for sure, But at this event, I met a guy that introduced me to a website called biggerpockets.com, which I'd never heard of before. And so I went on there and just was like just amazed. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. There's podcasts, webinars, calculators, forums to ask questions and everything. So I was like, this is awesome. So I didn't pay their $50,000 program, but I came back and looked at Bigger Pockets, and I played with the calculators, and I was like, this is amazing. And so I signed up initially with the free membership, and then quickly paid for their pro membership just to have access to those calculators, like unlimited use. I was like, that alone was worth that cost for the pro membership. And so I was just on there every day, running numbers, testing out scenarios for anything that came up. And then on top of that, listening to the podcast. So if you recall, I was working from home at this point. Every day while I was working from home, I would usually just have music playing, not really doing anything else. And then one day it occurred to me, I was like, I could be listening to the podcast while I work, So I started going back, and I was like, went to the very first one, podcast number 1, and just went through them, every single one, while I'm listening, and working. So I'm learning all this along the way. This was now by this point, early 2017, like January 2017, or late 2016, even, I guess. And so with that, there was right around that time in January, they did like a 90-day challenge. They said, okay, you're going to take this 90-day challenge to find your first or your next property. I was like, okay, let's do this. And so I started, researching, every day. Of course, we check the MLS with my wife, and then I check everything else like Craigslist or anything else I can think of to find something. And along the way with this, by the way, so I learned through those forums on Bigger Pockets, I found out about a local lender here in Idaho that does 10% down payments on investment properties. So no longer that 20%, I do 10%. And I also learned about some creative financing methods, which I never even thought about before. So again, I didn't have any savings. So I was like, still didn't know how am I going to come even at 10% down payment. But I realized that I had access to funds I didn't even think about. So that whole time I've been working, even though I wasn't really not really making a lot of money, I consistently paid into my 401k to get the company match. And so that, again, wasn't like a large sum or anything, but there was enough in there that I could borrow from it. And so I found out, okay, I can actually take a loan for myself through my 401k for that down payment. And for most people, that'd be like, ridiculous. You don't touch your retirement accounts. That's the kind of traditional sense of things. Like, that's your retirement. You leave it alone. Which for the most part, I agree. I was like, yeah, you don't take it to go buy a motorcycle or a boat or whatever. But I was taking it out to invest it into something that would create even a higher return, or at least so I hoped anyway. So that's what I did. So I take that 90-day challenge, and by this point, my birthday is in March. It's okay. So January, 90 days. I was like, I got to find something by my birthday. That's my goal. And so we did that, and it took until actually in March when I found this property. So I made a couple offers on some other ones in the way, but they got rejected. This one came up. I actually found it on Craigslist. It was a fourplex, not too far from where it's like 45 minutes from where I'm at, so not too far away. And we went and looked at it. It's a fairly newer building, built in the late 90s, so it wasn't old wiring and plumbing and stuff to worry about. The price was great. The numbers worked out well. So we're like, okay, let's do this. So get everything in place. Talked to the local lender, which honestly I was surprised they approved me for a loan with all the debt we had. But I guess the income from the property was enough to offset it. And so again, using that 10% down payment, borrowed from my 401k. That pretty much covered most of it. I did borrow essentially. So this was right after, of course, the tax returns. So we did have a little bit of tax return money. And back in 2008, after I finished my education, I actually at least did buy some stocks. I didn't have a whole lot of money, but okay, I got to at least buy a little bit. This is what my education is about. So I bought some stocks at that point, which was of course really great because they were all on sale at that point. And so some of those had done fairly well. So I sold some of those stocks, took my 401k and took some tax return money and used that for this down payment of about $26,000. So if you think those numbers, there's a fourplex for about $270,000 ish, which is right now is unheard of. But so we took the plunge. Now the funny thing is, like, this was still scary, So we'd never done this before, didn't really know what we're doing. Because I'd educated myself enough as I possibly could through the podcast, webinars, reading books. But it's still a scary step. There's a lot of risk involved. It's like, especially at this point, we had no financial security. If this would just go completely wrong and blow up in our face, we'd be definitely filing for bankruptcy. But it's like, from my perspective, prior to this, going back to, I guess, your question about staring the bankruptcy in the face, it literally gotten to a point where, prior to this, I was literally like just depressed and stressed out. I wanted to provide for my family, but I felt like a failure as a husband and father. I'm like, I can't give the things my kids need. Didn't want to. We couldn't do. One of my daughters was in band and wanted to continue playing band, but it's like, we can't afford to pay for the instrument. And so that it was difficult. So it made me feel. I was like, I got to do something. I got to figure a way to make a change. So I was like, I got to take the risk. It's like, what are we going to lose? At this point, we're almost at bankruptcy anyway. So if it fails, it just speeds up the process, I guess. But if it works out, then this is possibly a solution. So literally the night before closing, I even asked my wife. I was like, should we back out? We lose our deposit, but maybe it's not worth taking the risk. But luckily she was strong, and she's like, yeah, let's do it. We can't back out. And me personally, I trusted the numbers. Again, I'm a numbers guy, so if my numbers worked, I'm like, so went back to that. I was like, yeah, my numbers are good, so I got to trust in that this will work. And so we did it. So we closed on it, and it's like literally like just that breaking through that fear was the the starting point of it all, really. So like literally the next day, I was ready to buy another one. So get over that fear was the biggest step. And luckily it's just been tremendous since then.
Oh, gosh, stop it. Holy freaking cow. Just, guys, I mean, those of you who are listening on, if you're listening on the streaming service, Apple, Spotify, you need to go to YouTube and watch and just see the emotion of Don just recounting, that whole process. I mean, look, not everybody's been in that situation, but we've all been in the position where We just want to provide. We want to be, you weren't going out and blowing money on just frivolous stuff. You had a string of bad luck, right? We call it bad luck. Medical
Yeah.
bills, and this came up and that came up, and all right, we'll try this. And we cut, you probably cut back on spending on, going out to eat and going out, going out on simple dates, because you had to pay for all these medical bills that just never seemed like it would stop. And guys, listen, this wasn't like 1 or 2 months, 3 months. This is probably, a good stretch of, maybe a couple longer months, maybe into a year. But you think about all that debt piling up, all those expenses that piled up, and that weight that comes on. But one thing that you said was just impactful was everything lined up and it made sense. And getting over the fear, getting over that fear of just doing it, like,
Mhm.
and it changed you. It changed you. You closed on it, and now you're like, I'm ready to buy another one. You went all in on your family, all in on what you had invested in. Your wife had failed 4 times on that real estate exam. The 5th one she got. Then she's trying to show people who she didn't really speak a lot of English. So you were there for the support. I mean, talk about digging in as not only a dad, but as a couple, and saying, we've been hit with a lot, but there are other people that were been hit with more. You saw it because you went down to Argentina. You saw it and you're like, man, that mindset of our poverty is nowhere close to what they had. And you've already experienced poverty. So you're probably like subconsciously, man, I mean, if I go poverty, I've already been there before. I don't want to go there, but I know that I can survive. Just that whole process of getting where you were to where you are, unbelievable. I mean, I can just think how many people are like, man, I would have quit. I mean, you would have just quit. There's no way that you would have taken that leap of faith and go all in if you didn't believe in the process and believe the books and the study. I need to make this point also, that it was, you studied, right? You put in the work and studied it and knew, from going to a free event, then paying $100, which you probably were like, man, we don't have $100, but we're going to pay for the $100. So you networked with somebody and they told you to go here. Then you found somebody who was an angel investor, if you will, a site partner. I'll put down 10%. You bring the 10%. You made choices way back in 2008 that helped propel you to get to where you are. I mean, guys, that is just, if you believe in it so much, you study and research. Now we got Google and self-help and podcasts and people that are willing to give away free knowledge to those. So they're saying, learn from my experience. Man, Don, just listening to that, I was like, this is